So I just quit my job without another job lined up. Not just any job, but what I had basically told myself for the longest time was the dream job that I wanted. So today we're going to talk about why I decided to quit my dream job.
I started this video wanting to simply share why I quit my job, but ended up finding myself basically sharing my confessions as a recovering workaholic. It sounds dramatic, but I've slowly come to realize it's true, and you'll understand too as I share my story. So let's dive into how I got to that point, why my attitude shifted, and how I embraced the decision to quit my job without another job lined up.
Up until last Friday, I was working as a marketing manager, and if you've watched some of my recent videos, this might come as a surprise to you that I've quit that job, but this was not something that came out of nowhere. It's definitely something I thought a lot about, and this isn't me recommending or suggesting that anybody goes out and quits their job, but I also think a lot of times, a lot of us have similar thoughts and feelings, but we just kind of push them aside. At a point, I kind of came to a crossroads, so we're going to talk about what happened. I want to take a step back and look at when I actually started working. I started working when I was 16. I'm 26 now, so that's been 10 years. I've basically always had a job throughout school, during the summer breaks. I can't remember the last time that I didn't have a job without another job lined up. My first job was McDonald's. I had that job for probably longer than most people would suggest. I've definitely tried a few things, and since then I feel like work kind of became a source of validation and my self-worth. I could see myself performing well, getting paid, having money to spend on the weekend or like just to buy things was awesome, especially when you're just a teenager. And that was honestly the main motivation. So eventually I did go to a college program. That's when everything kind of changed for me. I never had as much motivation to do well in school. I think what was different was this program was really geared towards getting a co-op or internship and getting yourself right into the workforce. And that was really appealing. And I gave it my all. I studied marketing, and those are the jobs that I've had since I started my career. It was really clear how they wanted you to feel like it was so competitive, and it was really instilled in you that you had to bust your ass in order to make a name for yourself. It always felt like an exclusive industry, and it's funny now because I've watched videos kind of similar to this when I was going through this internally. Beyond just the marketing field, I feel like consulting has a similar energy, and a lot of other corporate jobs I think has similar ways that they condition you. And I'm not saying that in a malicious way. I just think that's part of the culture that's been around for so long. My dog is snoring like crazy, by the way. It started to become the most important thing to me was doing well in school, getting a good internship, getting a good position. It was a really intense program, so it wasn't just me, but we would be literally on campus until 1 a.m. sometimes, finishing our projects, doing everything possible to try to get that much further, to start our career and make a name for ourselves, get a good salary, etc. Don't get me wrong, I did really enjoy what I studied. I still am really passionate about marketing. What I didn't realize was the same attitudes I had when I started working at McDonald's, for example, wanting to take extra shifts, make extra money. There were periods that I worked 2 to 3 jobs and worked every single day of the week. That's the attitude that people hiring want to see. That's how I basically continued to progress in my career. I continued being able to negotiate my salaries, move to different companies, but my perceptions of who I was were completely intertwined with work and my career. This is when we talk about the saying, working to live or living to work. I really told myself for the longest time, especially when I started to kick off my career, I told myself that I'm the type of person that lives to work. I was basically brainwashing myself to believe that I can't be successful without having an amazing career. I had no issues with putting everything aside and also working at the office until 8 or 9. That was my life, and I was so happy with it. The reason for that was because I had believed and told myself that the reason I'm working is I'm living to work. I had a bit of an existential crisis over the last year. It's come to my attention that there's actually more to life than work. It was really hard to wrap my head around because coming from working nonstop, having gained so much validation and so much of the self-worth out of being successful in my job, whether that was literally working at McDonald's or then starting my career and getting one of my first jobs at a dream marketing agency, like Like all these things were such highlights in my life, tangible accomplishments, right? And then I started to realize all the other things that had actually fallen off because I was so fixated on growing my career. That was the only thing that mattered. So you might be wondering, how did I come to the realization that maybe it's time to reevaluate things? I would say the pandemic really changed things, as it did for a lot of people in a lot of areas of life. If you worked a 9-to-5 corporate job, you most likely work from home, and also other jobs as well. That was the first time that I had experienced full work from home mode, going from an office job that I was already staying way too late at. I was now working from home. At first it was fine. I think a lot of us went through very similar phases. At first it was like, yay, we can wear sweatpants at home. And then a couple weeks later it's like, oh, we're still doing this. And the emails aren't stopping at 5. Distance between work and home did not exist anymore. That was when I first experienced burnout. Up until that point, I never really understood what burnout was, didn't even know it was a thing. There was a video that I came across, I will link it if I can find it. She was basically explaining all the symptoms of burnout, what causes burnout, and I never felt like something resonated with me more. I was really confused what to do with myself because there was also nothing else really that fulfilled me, but also my job was creating a lot of stress and anxiety that was really manifesting itself. Like, I know I talk about trying to find balance, avoiding burnout, how burnout is preventable. I speak on that now because I've gone through it and experienced it so much. I basically recognize, okay, this is what happens if you don't try to find balance and if you don't try to create boundaries. I did a lot of self-reflecting, tried to find other sources of value, tried to enjoy my life outside of work, even though we were still mostly in a lockdown, especially in Toronto. But eventually a lot of circumstances changed as well for me when it came to work. That also helped me get out of this burnout cycle. That was a couple years ago now, and eventually I started to understand more about creating boundaries, creating distance between work and my self-worth. And I would say that's basically what triggered me to start thinking about the other side of it. Working to live and what that actually meant. I do go out and do stuff, but I don't go out like I used to. I wouldn't say that nightlife, those types of things play as much of a role in my life anymore, so I had to kind of figure out other things that I was passionate about. One of the things, to be honest, is YouTube. I did make YouTube videos literally since I was 10 years old, had made videos for so long, but in 2022 that's when I decided to kind of pick it up again. And this is just one example. I also started to go to the gym more frequently, but I finally felt like I was figuring myself out again. That made me realize career is one portion of your life. It made me realize what balance means to me and what I want balance to look like. If you think of like a pie chart, my ideal scenario is that pie chart is filled up with different portions of all types of things. And up until that point, everything kind of always revolved around work. A lot of the jobs that I had, I would know people that had been at a company for years. That was always described as kind of the dream for some people, is you find a good company, they give you good benefits, you keep getting promoted, making more money, and you can grow in a company and flourish in your career with good stability. What I never really thought about until it happened in front of my eyes was that stability can change up in an instant. I have worked corporate in marketing for 5 years now, over 5 years, and in that time, I have seen 4 instances of people getting laid off or fired or furloughed. Actually, no, there's been 5. I just thought that was kind of crazy. And then come to find out, after talking to others, they've said, oh yeah, my company did that every year. That's just part of the corporate world. You expect that there's going to be cuts. So then there's an anxiety every year that it happens. I didn't know that was a thing, and the circumstances were a little different every time that it happened when I was around. These were people that were my managers, my colleagues and peers, some of whom had been at a company for over 10 years, if not around 10 years. These are people that were always very loyal, and in an instant, everything changed. So that also really shook me, because up until I'd seen this happen, it was really instilled in me that you don't want to move around much, to different companies. You want to find a good place and you want to make your roots there. You want to prove yourself, get promoted, etc., etc. And then having seen this not once, but 5 times, that also made me reconsider how much value we place our worth in these companies that we work for. While they they can completely flip the switch on us, even if we're doing everything to the best that we can, even if we're completely loyal. You know, all these things that we're told is what makes you a good worker. That never sat right with me, paired with a lot of the burnout that I was feeling, and then also around a similar time having seen some of the furloughs and layoffs and people's lives getting flipped upside down. It completely changed my perspective on things. After these instances, I continued to just think in the back of my mind, this is a means for me to pay for a roof over my head, that I'm very privileged to be able to do all these things, but this is not my entire life. God forbid if something happens and I lose this job, it is not like I've lost my life's worth. Somehow, I don't know how the algorithm does this, but I found a few videos that really struck a chord with me. One channel I wanted to point out was Timothy Ward. His life and story are so interesting. He talks a bit about the American dream. I don't want to go into this fully because like this is a whole other topic, but he talks at one point, I don't remember which video, about people's preferences. People literally have different favorite ice creams or favorite colors. And if something as trivial as that can vary so much from each person, then why can't our ideas of what a dream life looks like or what our approach to life should be, how can those things not be just as different if we have such different preferences for something as trivial as our favorite colors? That struck a chord with me because, I mean, up until that point on paper, I feel like a lot of people would think that I was doing all the things right. I was continuing to progress in the direction that you're supposed to, continuing to earn more money, continuing to get a higher title. But just because that's one way of success or one approach that people view as being successful doesn't mean that that's the only right way or that there is a right way. So bringing that back to my decision to quit my job. When I got this role, over the moon. It felt like when I started that this was going to really set me in the trajectory of continuing to grow, continuing to level up. But a lot of the things I talked about earlier on continued to linger in my head. A lot of the things I did want to get, I definitely gained. However, this was also a contract role. So I went into this knowing that this was an 18-month contract and there was a set end date. Without going too much into like the logistics and all of it, it was basically an option that I could have renewed. Usually before it would get to this point, I think I would have really tried everything possible to make sure that something else was lined up. I've never had a break. The option to extend would have been for a few months, but there's also a lot of other things that I will eventually catch you guys up on in my life that also conflicted with that idea. It just felt like it was the right time for me. And when this was shared, one of my ex-coworkers had come by and was saying, why? And I said, it's time for a change. And she was like, oh, this generation now is always wanting to change and stuff. And in my head, I'm thinking things can change whether you provoke it or not. For me, it's not like I've completely given up on a career path or that I don't see myself working in marketing or working in 9 to 5. What I really want to talk about is the idea of not feeling like there's only one right way to go about things, especially when it comes to your job, especially the culture around having a job and the corporate culture. You know, maybe it's good that we are able to have different approaches, and if that will set you back in your timeline or your goals, then maybe it's also worth asking what those timelines are determined by and why we get so fixated on certain goals, if that's for yourself or what you see other people doing. So that is kind of in a nutshell the thought process. I feel like this was a little bit all over the place. I really do recognize this was something that came from a place of privilege to be able to make this decision. I want to talk a bit more in the future when I'm ready about what my plans are next, because there will be plans, but I also think I want to enjoy this time and share with you what my ideal days would look like, being able to reset my attitude of how I want to fill my cup, how I want to spend my days, and resetting what I want to get out of my next job and taking the time to be able to thoughtfully apply for them. Maybe it's not going to look like the most prestigious or sought after company that I used to think was the end all be all. I'm excited to share more of that with you guys. Let me know if you've experienced any of the things that I've talked about. I feel like we covered a lot. If you have any stories or advice to share for people that might be experiencing similar things or considering similar things, again, this isn't me telling you what you should or shouldn't do, but I know that hearing other stories and realizing like this wasn't something I was going through alone was really helpful. And ultimately, it's your life, it's your decisions. Don't let anyone else else, myself included, persuade you into thinking you need to do one thing or the other. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and to check out other videos from me on the screen, and I'll see you guys next time.